Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a pretty exciting interview. We've got Dan Head here. Dan, first of all, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Of course. First of all, who is Dan? Well, I've known Dan for quite a while because we've been in the same mastermind, but Dan's the owner of AMZ Elite. He is an absolute killer when it comes to Amazon PPC. Some of his claim to fame include conquering some of the biggest keywords on Amazon. Two great examples are Himalayan salt and potassium magnesium. Those, from my experience, are not easy keywords to conquer. Dan, thanks for being generous enough to share your insights.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start this off nice and easy. When it comes to selling on Amazon, I think you kind of have a zone of genius. How would you describe that? What is your zone of genius?
It's definitely turning underperforming potential into market leaders. Amazon brand growth, profitability optimization, cutting through the noise of what really works to dominate a niche and analyzing the data in a proper way where we can work on both the front end of the listing and the back end of the listing is where I like to focus.
Okay. I think there's a lot to unpack there. So when it comes to, taking something from an underperformer to a market leader, is there a standard set of tactics you use? How do you think through a problem like that?
Well, first of all, I like to start with diagnosing buyer intent. So I'm going to run like a series of reports and just really break it down granularly. I'm going to go down the taco side. I'm going to run things like Michael's Ngram. We also run Michael's Ngram for ASINs, specific just to ASINs. So we'll separate those two. So we'll run it for keywords and run it for ASINs. And then we'll use like the ACOS power ratio sheet. And we'll use the ACOS power ratio sheet to highlight a sheet that I use in-house called we call it the conversion sheet. And essentially what that sheet looks like is it's kind of like a stacked line for line. Like you'll have your lifetime and then you'll have your month and then the next following month and then your like last 7 to 10 days based on when your search term report, where you are in the month based on that data. And so we'll use the ACOS power ratio sheet to highlight those lines in red on the CVR sheet. And that gives my staff a clear-cut, actionable campaign that we know has a ton of wasted ad spend to go dig into that, go see why those campaigns are not performing. And since we have all those date ranges stacked on top of each other, we can quickly tell if this campaign did something in the past, and the month-over-month data lines up beautifully so we can see, is search volume dropping or things of that nature, because what that report essentially is it's like a copy of your campaign manager view with lifetime, and you export that, then the month, and then the month, and the date, and you also pull a helium report. And with the helium report, you're bring in your search volume, your organic rank, and your sponsor rank. And now when we highlight those campaigns in red, a common problem that I've seen in this industry is that sales went down on this campaign. They went down by 25%. So, a common use would be, okay, I'm going to go and push bids. Well, the CVR report will show you historical data, historical search volume data. So if I see, we dropped 25% traffic from the previous date range, I know the reason why I dropped 25% of my orders. So we're not overbidding to get that back. And based with the engrams and based with the fires going on inside the campaigns, we can clean up things very quickly. Tacos really isn't a hard thing to tackle at all with the right strategies, provided you're a big enough brand. Small brands might struggle. If you don't have enough keyword depth, you're going to struggle to get that down. But when you come down that side of things, you can literally just go through these reports and get there. And then something that we're in the process of rolling out now is I kind of call it like a master super report. I don't have a good name. I got to come up with some clever name for this report, something like what Michael does. But essentially, it takes like the search query performance data. It takes your search term impression share and your helium ranks, and it ties it all into one. And then what we'll do is we'll pull the defensive campaigns out of there and the auto campaigns out of there, and then we'll focus based on that. And then we'll run that report through another GPT, which will go and analyze all the data, and it's specialized just in analyzing that data from that sheet. And it will literally tell us where we need to start pushing TOS, where we need to push the bids. And you might be looking at 400 campaigns, but this thing is going to tell you, no, you only need to look at these 40. They fit the criteria for pushing. Your organic rank, is 3 through 5. Your click-through rate is solid. So bringing more bids to this, raising your bid and bringing more impressions to this is going to have a profound impact. Now, a lot of times I'll see in this report that we need to do as much as a 40 or 50% TOS change. I'm not ballsy enough to do that all at once. So, I'm going to break that down into a repeatable procedure. For like the last one we did, 40% was the tops that we saw. We added a column and said, okay, we're going to do a 20% increase, on these keywords, or 15 in the first round. We're going to monitor what happens with those campaigns to make sure nothing goes out of bounds, conversion rates don't crash, things of that nature. And then, we're going to go back 2 weeks later and make those changes based on, if the first round of changes went through. And it doesn't have to make the campaign instantly perform better, but we just don't want to see it fall apart. And then we're going to go and make the next change. And we've seen some strong organic growth by pushing, leaning into, the things that we need to lean into. So when you get all those reports together, the Ngram alone tells you a lot about buyer intent.
Mm.
Michael kind of designed that for like monitoring tacos, but I always add that conversion rate on that in column, because you have your clicks, you have your orders, you have the data there. You might as well include it and use these as like pivot points to further expand sales. Because I found it very easy to dial down tacos. It's not so easy to grow. That's where things get complicated.
Okay. And so it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is taking an account, or taking a product within an account that you think has potential.
Yes.
And then you're finding basically the underutilized conversion opportunities. Is that
Correct.
like a good way of summarizing what you're saying?
Yes.
Without kind of, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the flip side of the coin is, because these reports, the growth reports, are built, with search term impression share and search query,
Mm-hmm.
That helps a lot with just kind of dialing into what's working.
There's so many interesting things you could do with that. Say you find a couple of good opportunities. Obviously, you're going to start pushing PPC. But something you brought up earlier is you also started talking about how you'll make back-end changes. Do you factor other things in aside from just the front-end changes? Or sorry,
yeah,
the PPC changes? Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, even like the Ngram will just tell you like the intent of your listing, but that's the intent of your listing. So you need to sit there and think about, okay, this conversion rate has a lower conversion rate than I would like on this particular keyword. And how do I lean into that? Well, a lot of times we're going to lean into that by looking at the click-through rate and seeing how we can manipulate that. So by keeping those keywords in your infographics, that the keywords that your customers actually searching for, you can still greatly manipulate what's going on inside your own product. You just need to manipulate the listing to coincide with that. And, optimization is my bread and butter. So when I run the Ngram, the first thing I'm going to do is re-optimize that listing and take out everything that's not working. Because, the way I see things in there, it's like, man, if I could just hit a button and de-index for this keyword, I would. I literally would. I would just like take all the traffic away. And, I found through working with a lot of large supplement companies that you can greatly manipulate CPC by making the front end match the back end. So like when I do my keyword research, I'm going to have that master keyword research sheet, and I use three different colors to kind of tell me what I'm doing. And the first color is yellow, and yellow means I'll line that entire Excel sheet in yellow, and that means I have it in the front end and in the back end. And then I'll have another line for orange, and that means I either have it in the front end or the back end. Now, a lot of times those orange keywords will only be in the back end. Either they don't make grammatic sense, or, they just, don't work with the English language in the front end of the listing. So most of the times you're going to find them in that search term field, but I found it imperative to do this, because when you have that keyword in orange and you're converting very, very high on it, you go and you take that keyword and you find a way to get it in the front of your listing, put it in your description, which isn't showing because you have A+, you can really manipulate the CPC there. And you can manipulate the algorithm and into understanding that you are incredibly relevant for this. We didn't just see this in your listing. We see this in your listing in the front and the back. So we'll do that. And then we'll take a step more and we'll go down just the first column where the keyword is, and we'll mark that keyword in green, saying that means this keyword has been launched into a campaign. And then, so we know what we're launching and what's yellow and what's orange. And when I come back and I see keywords that aren't working, I'm going to go and turn that line to red. And that means I'm going to go kill that campaign. I'm going to go take those keywords out of my listing, and I'm going to go try the next keyword so that I can cycle in the next set, because it's literally physically impossible for us to tell buyer intent just by looking at a keyword. I mean, it's not something you can do. So having a system on the back end where you can constantly make things better is incredibly important, especially when you're trying to, build a mega listing, $1 million plus a year listing. Those don't come easy. You have to climb the ladder to kind of get there. So, the other thing that we like to do on that keyword research sheet is we actually add 2 columns in the beginning, and we match out either broad or phrase, and then we map out our exact. So we use our keyword research sheet for our optimization guide and our launch guide, and we keep it in a line. Now, when things are moving along, we'll probably go back to that broad column and that exact column that we created, and we're going to put in our conversion rate on it and the amount of orders it brings in, so we know how important it is. So when you have all this data stacked together, you can make really good informed decisions, and you can also go back and fix things. And as long as you keep that sheet up to date, you kind of have a guide for constantly making things better.
Makes sense. Something we've talked a bit about is buyer intent. How do you define buyer intent, and then how do you assess buyer intent? Because I want to make sure the viewer understands the level of depth you're going in here, because it's super interesting.
Okay. Well, to figure it out, it's simple as pretty much using the Ngram. But again, that's just buyer intent based on your listing content. So it doesn't mean you can't change it, you can't manipulate it. But that's just, I call it a buyer intent dipstick by itself. So it's going to show me what's currently working.
But how do you define it? So is buyer intent like a conversion rate, or what do you mean by that? Like, how would you, in plain terms?
That's an excellent question. That's a hard one to answer. How do I define buyer intent? Well, buyer intent is going to be based on your brand size and your niche, and conversion rate is going to play into it. So you need to know what your niche conversion rate is, and then hopefully shoot to be 2 or 3 times higher than that if you want to really gain organic rank quickly. But that's one of those questions that it depends. Because if you're dealing with a supplement company, it's going to be a lot different from dealing with an apparel company or a grocery and gourmet company, or, it's going to be different across the board. So what I would recommend is what your niche CBR is, and then you aim to 3x that thing. So that's a good strategy.
Okay. And when it comes to, say, knowing your buyer intent and knowing that you have a listing that you need to improve, what tactics would you use to then, like if say you're at benchmark, say you're at the niche level and you want a 3x your conversion rate, what would you do? Like what's the Dan Head methodology?
Well, I'm going to go break down the top 5 guys, see exactly what they're doing right. I'm going to go dive into customer review insights, figure out what the biggest purchase drivers are. Purchase drivers isn't always the greatest, but, I want to know what, they're trying to, what they're trying to look for. And like, I found in supplements, like if you're not saying easy to swallow on your second image, you're not doing your job right. I mean, it's almost, it's bad. Like, and there's a balance to it too. So you don't want to say easy to swallow and then here's 6 capsules. Nobody wants to take 6 capsules. So, you got to try to keep that in the 2 to 4 range. But if you look through supplements, you'll find that 25% of positive reviews are easy to swallow, almost every single one of them. So you need to find what those touch points are and drive that home. So I'll take the customer review insights to do that. I'll break down the messages in the top 5 sellers. I'll use a GPT to kind of, I'll import, all the main image, the infographics, and then you got to do it separately because you can only do 10 at a time. But then you can go and do the A+, and I'll go in there and build the messages that my competition is saying, and then hone in on what is the most important of them. And, what I've really realized is AI has been big for helping that.
Wow. Okay. Can you talk a little bit more? Like, this is fascinating. How do you use AI to analyze your competitors' listings?
Well, usually what I do is I'll feed it. Well, we can't feed it links anymore from Amazon since Amazon
No.
blocked it.
Yeah,
I'm
of
waiting for
course.
that to go away, I hope, or another AI finds a way around it.
Yeah,
I heard
okay.
that there is one out there that can do it a little bit because it's based on source code, but I haven't tried that yet. But essentially I'm gonna take their bullets, their title,
Hmm.
the description, all the images, all the content stuff, and I'm gonna feed this in the chat over several chats inside an actual GPT, and you can draw correlations to what these guys are saying, especially when you have about five of them, 3 to 5 of them in there, and you can hone in on what's the most valuable points that are kind of like moving the needle for them. And a lot of times, if they're really really good at what they do, like I butt heads with Golly all the time, and I mean, you guys know who Golly is. They're killers. They are killers. So you'll see that they are really kings of that click through tactic that I was talking about, because you'll be searching for that keyword and then you'll look at that first infographic and bam, there's that keyword right there. So,
Hmm.
again, it's all about solving the buyer's problem. What is that buyer's problem? Why are they buying it? Okay, they're buying potassium magnesium because they're dealing with leg cramps, or potassium magnesium is easy to swallow. So, and another thing that really I've found incredibly important, more than I really ever thought it would be, is color schemes. Color schemes matter a lot. So when I started working for the big supplement company in 2019, I said, okay, all your labels are white and black, and I feel like I'm going to take this to go to the hospice and die. That's what I literally told the owner of this company. Am I taking this to
Ugh.
live longer, or am I taking this to die? Because I feel like I'm in a hospital right now with this white and black text, and this
Mhm.
bottle should be sitting on the doctor's shelf. This is, not potassium magnesium that I'm trying to take to get more water into my muscles because my leg cramps are bad, or
Mm.
my blood pressure's high. So you need to find a way to convey a brighter message, and that's kind of a common problem in this industry from what I've seen.
I mean, that was an absolute banger of an answer. Just to recap so far, because honestly, I think if a viewer is watching this, they should have a pen and paper. The main takeaway is you had to diagnose search intent and really understand it. And then the way that I would describe what you just talked about was like empathetic listing analysis, where you really think about the customer and how do I create a listing that really empathizes with the customer and what they're going through when they're trying to buy. So
Yeah.
that's the way that I would describe what you just said in a maybe more high level summary, but that is an absolute banger of an answer. Like we could end the episode right now and it would be pure value. Okay, I wanted to
Did
talk to
you?
you. What's that?
I do have a question. I forgot who wrote it, but there
Hmm.
was there were like 9 prompts that were put out, and it's a 9 prompt list, and it's from somebody who does graphics, like big time graphics,
Yeah, okay.
and so I would have to dig them up. But you have these prompts, and it's all about creating a avatar inside the,
Hmm.
so that you can create your customer, and then you can interact with your customer. Yeah, and I thought that was really neat. It's something I'm just really starting to learn how to play with right now. But I like the fact that I can kind of build my customer and then ask him questions, or her questions.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, hey, who knows? Maybe we'll have you on a second time. We'll build a live avatar or something for like a
That would be cool. I would love to.
yeah, yeah. We could do that. Would be really interesting because I think and we could target goalie. We go after their apple cider
Shadow
vinegar
about.
gummies or something. Yeah, something non-competitive to what you're doing.
Yeah.
But so you brought up another really interesting thing, which is click-through rate enhancement. And I think a lot of sellers really, especially once they've started to understand how they can grow on Amazon and they've started to see some success, click-through rate is one of those metrics that ends up getting ignored because they just focus on conversion rate and just kind of forget about the idea of winning clicks. I would love to hear a little bit more about your approach to enhancing click through rate because you brought it up, but I think the average viewer would just love learning more about that. So, what do you
Well,
do for click through rates?
well, click through rate's going to matter the most on your main image, your price. Those are the
Hmm.
two biggest things that you can use to manipulate click through rate. That, and using the right keywords that the buyers are trying to see.
Hmm.
click through rate is so underutilized. We have a mutual friend, Gonza, and this was a couple of years ago. Gonza and I we were talking, and we both went to a podcast or something, and the guy literally said what the formula for organic rank is.
Hmm.
And the formula for organic rank is click through times CVR times market visibility. So now there are a couple other factors that aren't in there, and this was
Hmm.
given out 3 or 4 years ago, but that really kind of fine-honed it to me. And
Hmm.
when Gonza and I were talking, he's like, I have these 3 campaigns here. He's like, so you have this campaign and this campaign, and then he gave me 3 sets of dual campaigns, and he's like, okay, so which campaign is going to win the auction?
Hmm.
And when you sat there and looked at it, you had a campaign that's converting 80% of the time,
Hmm.
and you had a campaign that was converting 40% of the time, but it had 3 times higher click-through rate. So which one of those campaigns is going to win? It's going to be the one with the higher click-through rate. And the
Hmm.
reason why is because that listing is constantly getting clicks, and it's making more clicks by the time this guy is getting his sale. So Amazon's algorithm is leaning towards whichever way they make more money. And it's always going
Yeah.
to be whichever way they make more money. So if you have an astronomically high click through rate with a lower conversion, you can still get up past somebody who's converting higher than you. That's why, when you come out the gate and you're converting 50% of the time and you're like, yes, 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 but you're
Yeah.
not number one organically. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's exactly why. You need to get that click through rate up higher. And once you start to understand that, it's click through rate, it's CVR, and then it's traffic. And the easiest accounts to manage are the ones that have solid click through and solid conversion rate, because all we're going to do is start throwing much more traffic at it. Um, that's low hanging fruit. But understanding those 3 pieces right there is big. Now, what's missing out would be like seasonality and geolocations and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
you know, Geolocation matters a lot more than I even thought it did. When you see that buy box percentage go down, but you don't have resellers, it's geolocation. It means you don't have something in a warehouse in Iowa, in the cornfields, something like that. You're not gonna get a buy box around that area unless Amazon has that item close to it.
Yeah. Well, honestly, you've already kind of alluded to it, but what are some of like the unsexy truths about turning a loser into a winner on Amazon, or maybe turning a underutilized product into a winner on Amazon? Because it seems like there's some unsexy truths that nobody wants to hear,
Oh yeah,
and
there's a lot of them. It takes discipline.
go
It takes
off.
discipline,
Yeah.
reputation, constant refinement. You need, some way to make the front end of the listing better and some way
Hmm.
to make the back end of the listing better. There's just a lot of nuances that go inside it.
Hmm.
So the unsexy truth, probably the work that's behind it.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time to uncrack these things and get these things moving in the right direction. Then when you come across an account that doesn't name their campaigns properly, then you're like, oh, that's going to take me 10 times longer to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you guys don't rename your campaigns?
Oh yeah, I always do. Yeah. Yeah, anything I do, I'm going to rename campaigns, but I'm talking about walking into an account that you've seen for the first time
Yeah.
and you haven't built those campaigns, and then
Hmm.
you're like, where's the ASIN, or what item is this, or wait, you call this tree frog food. Well, you have 16 different kinds of tree frog food. So which one? It's like, you gotta have like a theme, first, that identifies that product. And then the other thing I like to do is, like, when I take over those campaigns, I like, if it's like a one word keyword campaign, like an exact campaign, and it's really important, I'm going to put the date of the change in there with the organic rank at that date, so that it's right in front of you the next time you go back to that campaign and look at it. If it's a high volume campaign and you're looking at it late next week, you know that I made the change on this day. Here's the organic rank. So everything's in front of you. It's directly in front of you. So, I like those things, but trying to turn something into English that it really isn't in English can be difficult.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a couple of like absolute bangers in there. One is turning things around on any product takes time. And two, record keeping matters a lot. And if you don't keep good records, you're in for a rude awakening quite quickly. Is that kind of like a fair way to sum that up?
Yes, and it takes a conglomerate of hacks and changes to really move the needle. It's not going to be one simple fix.
Yeah. Okay. So, kind of flipping to the other side of it, what actually works? We talked about a lot. We talked about a lot of different things. If you're starting to do this fresh and you're going to start tomorrow, what are the things that are definitely going to work? What in your experience is like, yeah, this is worth the effort?
Well, what's worth the effort? Well, first of all, I got to say, watching Tacos and Organic Rink like your business depends on it, because it does. You know,
Yeah. Okay.
I love that, and a lot of things like, you know, just really honing in the buyer intent, figuring out what's going on in the listing, what's working at that given moment, and leaning into that. So you need to be analytical enough to break this thing down and see the pivot points that are inside there. A lot of times people will fall in love with campaigns a little too much. Somebody like me might say, "Hey, this is an excellent bleeder, but it's bleeding you to death." It's you're not gonna recover from this one. You're bleeding to death.
Hmm.
But keeping your eyes on your rank is very important. Knowing that the changes that you're doing are actually working, and keeping
Hmm.
that in front of you is good. And like I said, building that keyword map so you know what you've optimized and what you're running and how well you've optimized for it. Those are big things that actually work. And running a report like the growth report that I was talking about, with your placement report, your search term impression share, and your search query, combining those three, you can make a lot of truths that are very easy to delegate to staff or your
Hmm.
PPC manager or whoever, just by using simple formulas on that data once it's created, because you can
Yeah.
draw a number of correlations from that. So even though you have 100 lines in the search query, it's going to tell you that the real 20 or 25 that you really need to be focused on pushing those extra hard, because they are bringing the rate benefit.
That is really, that's a banger of an answer. That's so awesome. And I mean, honestly, that's true in our experience as well. You really got to focus on the things that matter. And there's going to be a lot of noise if you let the noise creep in. So, very, very thoughtful answer. I like that a lot. Do you have any hot takes or any truth bombs you want to drop on the audience?
Well, a lot of times people complain about not getting enough traffic, and I feel like that's a conversion problem, and
Mm.
a CTR problem. Amazon is a product based buying engine.
Hmm.
And if you can't sell on Amazon, then you're going to struggle to sell anywhere else. And that's usually a correlation of what you're doing is wrong.
Mm.
So, too many sellers like to blame the algorithm or competitors, and that's not the problem. The other big truth bomb that I love is when a client gets really upset at you for tacos falling apart, but they decline to tell you they ran out of stock on the item the week before. It's like,
Yeah.
that's one of those things that, like, I can't manage your optimization and your PPC and everything else that I do, because I do full service. So
Hmm.
there's nothing I won't do. But that's a real problem, because for instance, with the supplement guys,
Hmm.
they were having me redline tacos at 25%, and that's not a problem, so I did it. But then when the payment reports got a little smaller, they're like, okay, we need to bring this down. We want you to bring this down to 18. And I'm like, okay. And then I start to look the top two items that drive the most ad spend. We had two variations, one out in each one, that were the best sellers. And so all we did was put a $1 portfolio budget on that thing, and the next day we came in and we had 15% tacos. It literally dropped 10%.
Yeah.
So when that FBA order gets created,
Hmm.
that's the second ads turn on. So if you haven't paused those ads, you're just throwing money out the window, because Amazon's saying, okay, we're going to deliver it May 15th when it's,
Hmm.
April 15th. And then people aren't going to buy it because they want it in 2 days. That's why that Prime logo is so, so important. Himalayan salt taught me that. back in COVID. We sold a ton of salt, and we have 3 containers on the water, and they got delayed, and we had a choice to make. We had about 10,000 units in our warehouse, and we had the option to either send those to FBA or hold them back for FBM because we
Mm.
knew we were going to be out longer. So, 10,000 units of Himalayan salt will sell in 8 days. That's 8 days
Oh,
of
wow.
FBA inventory. It's gone. And so we went from selling 650 bags of salt a day to 100. And that is the difference between FBA and FBM. And it stayed like that the entire time we were out of stock. So, that's something that you need to work with your staff or with the PPC manager, is letting them know when the inventory is getting bad. I mean, we make every single one of our clients send a available inventory and
Hmm.
unavailable inventory when they change. I don't care about, reserved or anything like that, because those things will take a while. I care what's actually available. So I make all my clients do that every week. Send me that so that I can keep your chocolates really, trim.
Honestly, that is both a truth bomb and just so true. It hurts.
Yeah.
Running out of stock or running low on stock, it just will absolutely decimate every other aspect of your business. It's so critical, and it makes perfect sense that you would be so relentlessly focused on that. Dan, do you have any kind of parting message? Anything you want to tell the audience?
Well, Amazon's a game of inches, so you just got to keep inching forward.
Yeah, that,
It's a struggle out there. It's difficult, but you really need to sit there and find the time to build the reporting and be able to manage that reporting. I mean, everything is follow up and action in this business. Follow up and action. If you don't follow up and act, then you're going to be left behind.
yeah, that's yet another hot take, or maybe yet another truth bomb, because I couldn't agree more with that. Okay, so where can people find you? Where are you on the internet?
I'm most active on LinkedIn. I haven't made it far enough along to launch my own YouTube channel like somebody that I'm talking to right now. I'm getting there. I have an
Yeah.
art, my AMZ Elite site isn't the most beautiful. I haven't built a .com site in 20 years, so I'm a little out of practice with that. But yeah, I would find me on LinkedIn, Daniel Head. You can find all my information. I do a newsletter. I've been a little behind on the newsletter, but I do a newsletter on LinkedIn, and I give out valuable advice for free.
That's fantastic. All right, so Daniel Head on LinkedIn. We're already connected on LinkedIn, and he's always dropping truth bombs on there. So if you're fiending for more Dan Head content, head over to LinkedIn and you'll get plenty more there. Dan, thanks again. This was incredibly valuable. You were very generous with both your time and the amount of information you're willing to share, and I thought that was awesome. So
Thank you.
thank
Thank you,
you
son.
very
I
much.
appreciate you very much.
Yeah. All right. Till next time.